Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. How are you? Thank you guys for joining. We've got so many of you already in the chat. Happy Ghost Story Thursday. It's so good to see everybody. How are you doing, LDD?
I'm doing great, LDN. Thank you so much. It's been a minute. It's been a while.
We're figuring some stuff out here. BerryPlace has just been holding our hand and walking us through this, and we had a little glitch, if you will. And he has got us through the forest, and we are out now. And here we are live with you, beautiful people. And tonight, we have a special guest that you guys, most of you should know and love already. We've got BerryPlace28 with us here on the computer. And he's going to tell us his experiences from when he was a tour guide on the one and only
the Queen Mary in Long Beach, California.
Pretty cool, right? We're excited.
You guys excited? We're excited to get Berry on the stage.
We've been like little kids all day today, getting ready to learn all this and do this with Berry. And again, thank you so much to BerryPlace28 for guiding us on a completely new system. StreamYard, we've never done this before. We might look a little grainy, but that's okay. The story is what is going to be good tonight. So we're going to go ahead and bring him on stage. How does that sound?
All right. So everyone, please give a warm welcome, round of applause to our fellow live streamer, our friend, Bob. You guys know him as BerryPlace28. Welcome in, everyone.
Hello. And you guys have the sage and holy water ready for these stories, right? Okay, just checking. Oh, hey, what's happening? Good to see you guys.
Hey. Did someone say holy water? Because we forgot to grab some holy water here.
Holy water.
You have some to spare?
Yeah, I do actually in the other room, believe it or not.
Good idea. Good idea. BerryPlace, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
System here so that we could have you with us tonight, but from further away. Pretty cool how this works.
It is, and this is their first time using StreamYard, so sorry we're starting a little late. And for those of you that had a broken link, it's because we had to set up the stream. So thank you for your patience while we got this going. But it's so good to see so many people in the chat. Look at it, all the people here.
Look at this.
These wonderful people. Hello, everybody.
Well,
I almost feel like I want to be like, huh?
I said, for people that don't know you, why don't you just give your tell them who you are, a little bit about you, and your backstory of the Queen Mary.
Sure. So for most of you, you know that I'm a theme park streamer, and you can find me at BerryPlace28 on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or X now, and Instagram, of course. So when I'm not streaming, obviously, I love spending time with my family. But one of the things that most people don't know is I actually was a cast member years and years and years ago, which is kind of funny because the cast member experience wasn't at Disneyland. It wasn't at DCA. It was at the Queen Mary, because back in the day when I used to work at the Queen Mary between 1988 to 92 is when I finally left. Basically, I had the opportunity to work for the city of Long Beach. And then the city of Long Beach kind of was trying to make a deal with the Walt Disney Company to actually make their own little kind of like Disney Sea over in Long Beach. And so it was kind of interesting because at first I was working as in merchandise. So I worked in the stores and I sold, items to, people. And also back in the day when it was really popular, remember those things called photozines where people would, you take pictures of people and they put you on the cover of a magazine, and they'd be different types of magazines. They were really funny. So I was doing that. And then I worked in merchandising on the ship and whatnot. And it was a lot of fun, but unfortunately that was not my calling there at the Queen Mary, because I wanted to do something different. And they actually had an opening for tour guides, and I applied for it and I got the position as a tour guide. And about that time is when the Walt Disney Company actually took over and started running the Queen Mary. So the city of Long Beach owns the Queen Mary, but Disney was actually running the operations and trying to see if they could actually take over and if they would actually be able to do a Disney Sea. unfortunately, it didn't work out, and that's why you now have Disney Tokyo Sea, right? Um, so that is where it ended up going, and then instead of getting another, Westcott or anything like that, they end up building, Disney California Adventure. So, yeah, that's what kind of happened. So, and by the way, if I'm missing the chat, I apologize, everyone. Feel free to let me know if you guys have questions as we're going through this. But so one of the cool things was not only did I become a tour guide and I did tours for the Queen Mary, but I also did tours for the Spruce Goose when it was actually in the dome. Now that dome is, emptied. After that, they used it for movies like Stargate and Batman and things like that back in the late 80s, early 90s, or no, sorry, 90s. So it was used for a lot of different things before it became a cruise ship terminal. But the Queen Mary still sits afloat, barely. I swear that I don't know how that ship is still afloat to this day. But it basically has been around since the early 70s when it opened. So to give you a little history about the Queen Mary, because I think we should talk about the history about the ship before we actually get into these ghost stories, which are going to be kind of spooky and creepy. So the Queen Mary, and I've got a few notes here. So if I'm looking on screen, I'm just looking at my notes. Just remember, because when I was a tour guide, we're talking about long time ago. So I'm kind of showing my age and my gray hair for some reason, or white hair.
I'm right behind you.
So most people don't realize that when the Queen Mary was being built, it was going to be the biggest ship of all time. In fact, it was bigger than the Titanic, and it ended up being about 1,200 feet long, 135 feet wide. It could hold 58 million gallons of fresh water. It was built with over 33 million rivets, and it's crazy what it took to build the ship and put it together. And the interesting thing here, I'm going to go a little grim before we get into the ghost stories, because while the ship was being made, a lot of people didn't realize that the ship is built in compartments, and while they're building it, unfortunately, there are many times, and it wasn't just with the Queen Mary, but it's been with many ships in the past, where people would be working on the inside of compartment areas, and they would get sealed in, and and they would die aboard the ships because they would be sealed into these compartments they couldn't get out of, and people didn't realize that people were in them. And so Queen Mary was one of those ships that also had situations like that. And it didn't finally launch until it made its maiden voyage May 27th of 1936. Wow. So it actually left France and went to New York. It actually took 5 days, 5 hours and 13 minutes to make it across the sea. And if you think about it these days, ships make it across the ocean really fast. You've got jetliners that make it over, in hours. I mean, it took a long time. And basically, it only went about 38 miles per hour, which is 32 knots, I think it was. Right. At the time, that was really fast. So it when it launched and it made its maiden voyage, it was the largest ship, and it was larger than Titanic to cross the Atlantic. And it was an amazing ship. During its years, it also was used during the war. We're going to talk about that and one of the ghost stories that goes with that as well. So it was called the Great Ghost. And during World War II, it would transport about 15,000 soldiers on the ship, which is crazy because it was only built for a few, thousand people or a couple thousand. And here it is, transporting, 15,000 people on the ship. But because it was the biggest and fastest ship to cross the Atlantic, it really helped. In fact, Adolf Hitler put a hit out on that ship and offered, I think it was $250,000 to anyone who could sink it, any submarine that could sink it. So that's how fast that ship was. And then, of course, after the war, it went back to its heyday of being a transatlantic ship. But unfortunately, by 1967, when they finally ended its final voyage, things like other ships were just faster than the Queen Mary. You had airplanes that were faster than the Queen Mary that could cross the Atlantic. So a lot of people stopped traveling on the Queen Mary. And so eventually Cunard, who actually owned the ship, sold it to the city of Long Beach. The city of Long Beach brought it in to port. And once it made its final voyage to the city of Long Beach, they put it into a dry dock there, and they actually, pulled everything out of the boiler rooms and all the engines, most of the engine stuff, and kind of just gutted the ship, renovated it, turned it into a hotel, and made it it's a ship that you can tour, and you've been able to tour it since the 1970s. It's an amazing ship.
Yeah.
And there's some great things, about the ship that you can learn. And they still have tours this day. There's tour guides that work there, just like I did. They have haunted tours as well. Some of that stuff is pretty cool. Some of my friends who are watching tonight, I think Vince and David, went with me. We went to celebrate my friend's birthday. We went on one of the haunted tours, and it was kind of interesting to hear and see things, aboard the ship. Didn't really encounter much paranormal activity that night, but the thing is, when I was a tour guide, I experienced quite a few paranormal things, and all the stories that I'm going to tell you tonight are from my point of view, things that happened to me while I was working there at the Queen Mary. So this is not, I heard this on Unsolved Mysteries back in the 80s, or this is something I read from the internet. This is all stuff that happened to me. And I think it's, pretty interesting. There's a couple things that I'll probably talk about that I didn't experience, that other people did experience. But most of the stuff is directly from my experience, working on the ship and being a tour guide. The great thing about being a tour guide on the Queen Mary is that I had the keys to every room in that ship. I pretty much could go anywhere I wanted to. So on my lunch breaks or my regular 15-minute breaks that we have to get in the state of California here, I would go and roam the ship, because it was so amazing and so much fun that you just wanted to go and experience, the ship itself. And sometimes it was really cool, and sometimes it was really spooky. But that's what was so cool, is that you got to experience these spooky moments. So before I actually became a tour guide, though, my first story happened when I was in merchandising. And so there was an employee who worked there, and he'd worked in this center store, and I think they changed the name of it now, but basically it's where the center smokestack used to be for the Queen Mary. And so if you go on the Queen Mary today, you have the Piccadilly Circus area, and then right behind the Piccadilly Circus area, there's some stairs that go down to the hotel, but beyond that is a store, if they still have it open. And that store was known to have a lot of activity, and it was always rumored that the man who worked there all the time, he was a full-time employee, and he called it his store. And so he loved to go in there and he'd have different things happen to him, and he would tell us, and we're like, whatever, you didn't see anything in there, you didn't hear anything in there, nothing happened, what are you talking about? Well, one of the things he'd always talk about is how things would fly across the room. And you're like, whatever, things didn't fly across the room. And this is before I experienced anything. This is like my first experience aboard the Queen Mary. So I happened to be giving this guy a lunch break one day, middle of the day, nothing's happening, it's boring. I think it was like a Wednesday afternoon. And I was like, okay, I think I was flipping through a magazine at the register because no one was coming in. And the ship was known to be pretty dead during the week. So, dead. Oof. I guess that's a good term.
Unintended.
So anyhow, I'm on this lunch break, and he was due to come back in about, I think it was like 10 minutes or something. And all of a sudden I'm hearing like something rattle, and I'm like, what is that rattling? I don't know what that is. I walk around the store. I can't see anything. And so I'm like, okay. So I go back to the register, and I'm flipping through the magazine, and all of a sudden I hear this rattling again. I'm like, well, that's really weird. What is, it's not the air conditioning system. The air conditioner's not even on, So I was like, all right, well, let me walk around the store again. And I walk around. And by the way, the store was spick and span. This guy kept it really neat and clean, and there was nothing on the floor. Of course, Disney doesn't want anything on the floor. So I'm walking around, and I can't find anything. And I don't know why I'm hearing this noise. So then all of a sudden I hear something that's coming from this rack nearby, and it's the same sound. I look at it. I don't see anything. Go back to my magazine. And then all of a sudden I hear something, and it sounds like a rattling and a swoosh. And I look up, and I see something in the corner of my left eye, like fall to the ground. And I was like, what the heck was that? So I decided to walk over to where I thought it came from. And I'm like, okay, I don't see anything over here. And I'm walking around. I'm like, what was that? Well, it was a t-shirt on the ground with a hanger still on it. The funny thing was is that this shirt belonged on the rack that I heard the noises coming from. And so when I walked over there and I put it back on, I got this eerie feeling. And all of a sudden I felt this cold chill. And I'm like, okay, this is weird, because the gentleman who worked there would always say every time something happened, there would be a cold chill. And I'm like, whatever. So I was like, that was weird. I've never experienced it. And that was my first little experience on the Queen Mary where I, saw something. Well, the guy comes back from lunch and I said, hey, you're not going to believe this, but this is what I encountered. And I know that there was nothing on the floor, and the shirt ends up there, but I was hearing all this around. He goes, I told you. And I go, what do you mean you told me? He goes, I told you guys all the time. I always have this issue. Things are flying around the room, and I always have to replace, things back on the rack. And I'm like, yeah, no one believes you. And he goes, do you believe me now? I'm like, well, I kind of do, because something kind of happened. And I'm like, that was just coincidence. He goes, it's no coincidence. It happens all the time. And he goes, I'm just glad that someone else saw it besides me. And I said, okay. Well, I was working in merchandising at that time. Well, after that, I became a ship's tour guide. And so when you become a ship's tour guide, you can do these tours that could be anywhere from 1 to 3 hours long. And you would do about 1 to 2 tours a day. And also we were trained to do educational tours about the Queen Mary itself to like schools or, different organizations, as well as educational tours for the Spruce Goose. I don't really have any stories for the Spruce Goose because seriously, nothing really happened there. But after I became a ship's tour guide, when I said that I had a key to everything, literally every time I went to work, they give you a set of keys and you had a key to pretty much everything on the ship, except for the hotel rooms themselves. But there were certain hotel rooms that were not used anymore that were on the tour that we would get to show them what people would look like in a third class or first class or second class, room back in the day. And so that was kind of cool. And everything was fairly, original to the time, when I was a tour guide back then. I don't know what it's like today, obviously. But so when I was giving tours, they could be quite long. And this one day I happened to do 2 tours. And by the time I was done with the tour, I think I'd worked about, I think one was a 3-hour tour and the other was an 1.5-hour tour. So 4.5 hours, I'm completely exhausted. I'm done. I didn't want to give any more tours that day. And they said, listen, we have a big group and we need to do at least one more tour today. And we sent everyone else home. The only people left are doing tours right now. Can you do it for us, Bob? And I was like,
no pressure.
I was so exhausted. I was tired. I'm like, I don't want to do this, but well, let's go. All right, fine, let's do it. So I meet with this group, and there was about 16 people in this group. And to be honest with you, I was like not in the mood. But as a Disney employee, you put all that behind you. You put the smile on, and you're like, "Hi, how are you? Let's have a great tour. All right, it's gonna be great." Inside, you're all, dude. So the great thing is that the people on this tour, they were asking a lot of questions. And when you get a lot of questions, it helps you pass the time quickly, as you know. So as they're asking questions like, well, this is a really good group. And they're being funny with me and I was being funny with them or having a lot of fun. They're like, tell us some ghost stories. We want to hear about the ghost stories on the Queen Mary. I'm like, oh, all right, well, you guys are a great group. So I'll tell you all the ghost stories I know as we go throughout the ship. I'm not going to tell you all the stories I told them because some of them I'm going to tell you a little bit later. But it was really, really cool because they just had a great time with me. And it was an 1.5-hour tour that I was doing. So we're going through the ship. And when we get to the end of the tour, we're in the boiler room. Now, the thing about the boiler room is it's gutted out. There's not a whole lot in there. But you got to realize that everything on that ship is just really bolted down well. I mean, you're talking about, nuts and bolts that are like this big or bigger, throughout that ship. And everything is very, very, even to this day, what wasn't gutted out is pretty well secured in there. And there's a lot of big, huge pipes that are running through the boiler room area still to this day. And so as we're going and I just got done telling a ghost story, I think, in the boiler room area. And once I was done telling the story, I started getting questions from everyone. And so I'm fielding questions and whatnot. And all of a sudden, I hear the shaking. And I'm like, what the heck? And the pipes above us start violently shaking. And I'm like, oh, what man, is that? That is crazy. And I had heard from other tour guides that they had some sort of experience where stuff starts moving or shaking crazy in the boiler room for no reason whatsoever. And it was to the point where I was scared and worried that we need to leave because these things shouldn't be moving as quickly and violently as they were moving and shaking. They thought I was putting something on. They thought, oh, this is part of the show. This is part of the tour. We're getting, something on this tour. And I said, everyone, please walk calmly with me this way. And they're like, calmly. All right, well, we'll walk with you. No problem. And I was really kind of like worried and scared. And so we walked out of there into the middle of the ship. And I started to tell them, hey, I'm really sorry about that. Everyone okay? Did anything happen while we were there? And they're like, well, you did it. What are we talking about? Obviously, you were trying to do something weird. And I'm like, I didn't do anything. Okay. So as you could tell, those pipes are not supposed to move. They're not supposed to shake. And I don't know what is going on. They're like, no, seriously. And I'm like, no, I didn't do anything. And they're like, really? And I'm like, no. So anytime we encountered something aboard the ship, the tour guides were always told that they need to go to security and file a report, especially if there's any sort of paranormal activity. So I went and I filed a report. They sent an engineer in there to check it out and make sure that everything was okay. The crazy thing was I went back there, with the engineer, and I was like, look, these were literally shaking. He's like, no, they weren't. I'm like, yeah, they were. And he's like, how? He goes, look, and he's trying to shake them. He's trying to move them. There's just no way to move them. It was just the weirdest thing. Now, some people said, oh, it's probably something in the pipes. Well, these pipes aren't used anymore. So I don't know why they would be, moving like that. But it was just really kind of spooky. To me, it freaked me out because I wasn't expecting anything to happen. And everyone else thought it was the greatest thing ever because they were like, we're getting some ghost experience on this tour. And I'm like, I'm not doing anything. And I don't know why it's doing that. But that will the pipes thing kind of plays into one of the stories I'll tell you about in a bit here that I'm going to get to. So one of my favorite rooms aboard the Queen Mary is called the Queen Salon. The Queen Salon is a beautiful salon, and I mean everything about that ship has Art Deco in it, and it's got very rare woods, teak wood. You've got different woods from other countries. They have inlays. They have what was that pearl? What do they call that? Pearl? I can't even think of it now. Mother of pearl. All throughout the ship in the pool areas and stuff like that. There's so many beautiful things that make up these rooms, and the Queen Salon was one of my favorite rooms. And actually, you can actually see the Queen Salon in the movie Harlem Nights with Eddie Murphy. So you can go back and see it there. And I think it was in Room 13, which was another good movie. They filmed a lot of movies aboard the ship. So you can actually see that room. Well, the thing about the Queen Salon is it's also known to be haunted. And one of the ghosts that was known to haunt there was called the Lady in White. And the crazy thing is that the Lady in White would be known to appear, and she would dance to unheard music. And she would always appear close to wherever there was some sort of instrument. If they had a piano in there, or a radio, or next to where the speakers were. Obviously, those were put in later, but she was always known to be where music should be coming from, but there was no music. And so one time I was on a tour and I was giving the tour, and you also need to know that when you're a tour guide, sometimes rooms weren't available. Like maybe the Queen Salon was being used for a function, so it was off limits and you couldn't go. And sometimes it was. So whenever we could go to these, the Grand Salon or the Queen Salon or whatever, we would go to these areas. And like I said, the Queen Salon was one of my favorite rooms for the ship. It's just a beautiful room. So I'm giving the tour and I'm talking to everyone about, what the Queen Salon was like back in the heyday and whatnot. And I asked if there's any questions from anyone. And they said, yeah, what's with the lady over there in the white dress?
Oh, man.
What lady in the white dress? She's like, the lady that was right over there. I saw her. She was in a white dress. Wait, did I see something? So I knew the story of the white lady, but I'd never seen her before. Wow. And I said, so you saw her where? And she goes, over there in the corner. I said, seriously? And she's like, yeah. And then everyone started getting a little freaked out. And I was like, look, she's like, do you know, did I see someone or did I see something? I said, well, let me tell you the story of the lady in white. So I kind of proceeded to tell her about how people have seen this lady in white who dances to unheard music. She got really upset and she got kind of scared. And then everyone's like, can we hear a little bit longer? I'm like, I doubt that she's going to come back. And be honest with you, I've never seen her. I've heard about it, but this is the first time I've been on a tour where someone said, hey, I saw a lady in white. Who was that?
Wow.
And she was confused because she noticed that the lady in white was wearing a dress of the Art Deco era. So she was like, why is that lady over there dancing in an old dress, you know? And she at first thought that maybe it was, you know, someone who was like a cast member who was, you know, playing a part of,
Sure.
you know, cosplaying or something like that. But of course it
Mhm.
wasn't. But the crazy thing was, like, every time I went to that salon, I'm like,
Where is
see
she?
it. I don't see her. But it was kind of weird. And, you know, because I still to this day had never seen her. But the fact that I was able to go on the tour and then this lady asked me about her, and I didn't even talk about the lady in white. I literally, I usually didn't tell that ghost story. I kind of stayed away from that one.
Mhm.
If people wanted to hear them, I would tell the ghost stories. But also, you know, sometimes you had families and kids on the tour, and you know, you don't want to creep them out too much. If they started asking, then you could tell them the story. But I just thought it was really, really interesting that, you know, she was asking about this lady, and I was like, oh, really? Yeah, there is a ghost here. So crazy.
Wow.
That's
Uh,
a good one. That's a good one. I
That's
yeah.
remember hearing about her.
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've heard about her, obviously. Is it the little girl at the pool? Like, there's some that from going on tours that you can remember
And
hearing
correct
about.
me if I'm wrong. I think they have like placards or plaques on the
Mhm.
walls of ghost sightings throughout the ship where those ghosts have been spotted. And
Right.
Yeah, I think they have that now. Back when I was working there, they didn't have
they
anything like
probably
that.
didn't. Yeah.
And in
Mhm.
fact, they didn't start the ghost tours until the 90s,
I
is
was
when they
gonna
started
say,
doing
yeah,
the,
that's probably something newer that they're
Yeah.
capitalizing
yeah, it
on.
was like, it was called like Ghost of the Queen Mary or something like that, or it was no
Something like
dark something. It wasn't Dark Harbor, but it was dark something.
Mhm.
But it was something spooky, and actually it's funny, I'll tell you about that in maybe towards the end, because I was another cast member for that
Wow.
thing. So the next story I have for you guys is really about the ghosts that are in the pool. So
Okay.
there
Fun,
was
yeah.
there was, you know, you had a first, second, and third class section. And by the way, can you guys guess where the first class section was on the ship? The front, the middle,
I
or the
mean,
back?
I'm gonna go with the middle, but I probably
I'm going to say the front.
Okay, so first class is always in the middle of the ship, and the reason why is because when a ship is rocking back and forth like this, the middle is the most
less
stable.
movement. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. That's what I
Yep.
was thinking.
Exactly. So third class is always at the front, and second class is always at the back. So that's how they did things. And by the way, passengers were not allowed to intermingle. So if you paid for first class, you stayed in first class. You paid for second class, you stayed in second class. They were not allowed to intermingle with each other. So they had their own pools. You know, you had the first class pool, second class pool, and so unfortunately, there was a girl. She's known as Jackie, and she unfortunately died in the um, second class pool. And the funny thing, or not funny, but the thing is that she's been known to haunt that area. Now, where the second class pool is now a theater aboard the Queen Mary. But she's known to be around the theater area and the first class pool area. Other ghosts seen around the first class pool area have been ghosts in bathing suits. I never saw the ghosts in bathing suits. There's also another little girl known to have carrying around a teddy bear in her arms.
I heard that.
And then also there have been known to see people have seen footprints, like wet footprints that are walking around the pool. So Jackie was the most popular one because people would actually hear her voice. They would hear disembodied voices. They'd hear splashing sounds. The funny thing is, there's no more water in the pools. So when you go in there was no water. So it's like, okay, there's wet footprints where there's no water. There's splashing sounds, but there's no water. What the heck is going on? You know, this is kind of weird. Some people said, you know, this, and they would have, you know, psychic mediums and other people, paranormal people come in to check out the pool area. Some of them said, you know, hey, there's a portal in here to the other side. And it's like, what are you talking about? And the reason why I said it like that is because even though I'd encountered, you know, a few little ghost stories here and there, I'd never seen a portal. And these portals supposedly would lead to the dressing room areas. So you would go in the back where the dressing room area is, and supposedly a portal was there, you know, to the other side. But again, I never saw anything. I never encountered anything with a portal.
Wow.
However, there are times when I would go on tour and I would talk about, the ghost aboard the Queen Mary, and I would talk about Jackie. And the weird thing is that there were times when I would tell the story about Jackie and how people would hear disembodied voices or hear her giggling. And people would say, well, did you put those there? And I'm like, put what there? They're like, there's wet footprints around the pool. And I'm like, what? And
Oh, man.
none of us obviously did that. It was always just weird. And sometimes it happened, sometimes not. The crazy thing was that like that day, I just was on a tour earlier and was in the pool. And it's funny too, because based on where everyone's at, the tour guide, sometimes you'll like go to the pool. Oh, another tour guide there. So you'll rearrange and go to another location. Well, the thing was, I ended my last tour by the pool and I started my second tour by the pool. So it was really weird because there was only a handful of tour guides that had been in there before I came back. And I asked them later, I said, do you see any footprints around the pool? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, there were on my tour. And then we'd all laugh and compare about it, because that was the thing, is that you would see these footprints and you're like, where did these wet footprints come from? That is just the weirdest thing.
Wow.
The one thing though that I did encounter is that I did get to hear Jackie, laughing, which was really kind of spooky. You'd hear this little laugh and little giggle. And I remember one time we actually had a family on the tour, and there was a little girl on the tour, and I thought it was her laughing. And so I turned to the family and said, what did she think that was funny? And they're like, she didn't laugh.
Oh, man.
Oh. Did you hear that? And they're like, yeah, we heard that too. Did you hear where it was coming from? They're like, we think it came from over there. And the funny thing was, it was over by the side of the pool. So we were, and by the way, when we started, there was like a balcony area above the pool, and then you could walk down to these steps and then down where the pool was. And so we were up in the balcony area. I'm like, I'm going to go down there. Why don't you guys stay right here? I'm going to go down there and see if I can see anything. And couldn't see anything or hear anything. Walked back upstairs and heard the voice or the giggling again. And we were like, okay, so I think it's about time we leave here, because this is not cool. And it was really kind of freaky, because most of the time, you walk through there and you wouldn't hear or see anything. And then, when that happened, and that probably happened about, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 times where I was on a tour where we heard voices or giggling or something happened. And every single time it happened, the good news is everyone always thought I was playing a joke on them, or they thought it was part of the tour. Oh, is this part of the ghost tour? We're not on a ghost tour. We're on a historic tour. This shouldn't be happening. So you're getting lucky that you're getting to hear and see the stuff, because most people don't hear this stuff.
Mm-mm.
So it's really kind of interesting, because, you hear about the stories, and when you experience them, you're like, that was weird. Okay, let me go report to security. I'll be right back. So,
right.
But yeah, that was, yeah. And what was sad though too is that sometimes when people would tell me, hey, I heard like a little girl crying or making a noise. What was that all about? And then sometimes you feel bad, because you're like, is Jackie or this ghost caught, here? And is she caught in between dimensions, or the afterlife? I mean, how sad is that if she's a spirit and she's not able to cross over? Who knows? I mean, it just kind of makes you wonder about some of those things. And it's like, is she always going to be there? Did she not see the light and go through to the light? I have no idea, but it's just like, wow, this is kind of crazy, experiencing and hearing these things.
Wow.
Now, have you ever tried to debunk anything that you've encountered at all? Like, okay, well, maybe there's kids laughing, or
every single time. Like when I told the people, hey, stay here, let me go down, because there are times when we would cross other tour guides, and maybe they were leaving while we were coming into the pool room. But if usually I would try to check to make sure that there was no one else in there before we walked in with the group. So I'd unlock the door, look in there. Okay, no tour guides, there with the group. But there are times where I thought, well, maybe a tour guide was walking with a group out, and maybe I heard some laughing from them. And no, it was never the case. You go down there and there's no one there. And the crazy thing is too, is that, and you guys might think I'm a little bizarre and crazy, because I'm getting ready into my next story about something I did on one of my breaks one time with another coworker. But because we had the keys to the ship, I would just go roam the ship. It was so much fun just to go roam it. and
Absolutely.
experience
Too.
things. But sometimes when you're roaming the ship, you're by yourself. When you're by
Mhm.
yourself, it is spooky, especially because some of these places are not well lit. Some of the places, you've heard about, these ghost stories and what has happened, and it kind of, it's kind of like the movie Jaws, right?
Mhm.
You're probably not getting eaten by a shark, but you're going out in the water and it's kind of spooky. Is a shark down
Right.
there? Well, same thing. You're on board the ship and you're like, is a ghost going to pop out any moment or do something or say something? And that's the crazy thing, is that you never know what to expect, because you would hear stories and then sometimes you experience it and sometimes you wouldn't. And I think that's what was so cool, is that people got to experience and talk about these things. Now, there were a few tall tales that, because dead men do tell tales on the Queen Mary, but where, ghost stories were created by, some of the cast members and whatnot, and they were never quite true. And eventually you found out about them. But yeah, and I'll tell you about one of those towards the end. It's the last thing I'm going to talk about. It's something I didn't experience, but I'm going to tell you about it because you can actually possibly experience it yourself. And I'll tell you how you can do
Ooh,
that. So,
yes.
um, so the next thing I was going to talk to you guys about was the Gray Ghost. So the Gray Ghost. So when World War II happened, they decided to use the Queen Mary as a ship to haul up to 15,000 troops across, the water. Now, it was crazy because the ship wasn't made to haul soldiers like that, and literally people sometimes were standing. They had to take shifts to go sleep in the bunk beds. They had to take shifts to go eat in the hall. Most of the time the soldiers were standing the entire time until they had to go lay down and sleep, or until they had to go eat in the mess hall. And it was very, very uncomfortable for many of them, and it was really, really sad because they were basically hauling as many troops as they could overseas, to help with the war. And the ship was actually painted gray. That's why it was called the Gray Ghost. So if you see pictures of the Queen Mary today, its original colors were the canard color. So it was the black, white, and the like orangish red color. And this was completely painted, white. And so it would literally make, crossings throughout, World War II. And it really helped. In fact, it really helped with the war, or it helped, with the war, I should say. But I think it was May 5th of 1940s when they had the first sailing or first voyage as a troop transport. And basically, it would go from, if I recall here, um, it would sail with a convoy, by the way, and it would go all the way from, geez, I mean, it would make trips to the Empress of Canada, Japan, Sydney, Australia. I mean, it went all over the troops. Um, and oh, actually, sorry, that was the first one. The first one went to all those different locations, and it had about 5,500 troops. But then it ended up docking in Singapore. They ended up refitting it, painting it, and then it finally went back out. And I think it went back out like in, well, it was 19. Wait, I think it was 1942. Yeah, 1942 is when it went. So, all right, sorry, I'm just going back to my memory because I wasn't born.
That Rolodex.
But obviously, it was really essentially the part of the war. In fact, Winston Churchill, made it into what it was for the Grey Ghosts, so that could help the war. Unfortunately, there was one situation though where the Grey Ghost was sailing across the harbor. And while it was sailing across the harbor, as I mentioned before, it had a convoy with it, and the convoys would basically kind of zigzag in front of the ship. And it did that because it was trying to, they were trying to avoid the Queen Mary getting hit with torpedoes by submarines. So if these ships zigzagged in front of the Queen Mary, submarines wouldn't easily be able to, take out the Queen Mary itself.
Right.
So, one of the ships that actually was convoy was called the HMS Kurosawa, and it was zigzagging in front of the Queen Mary, hoping to throw off any of these, attacks from the submarines or any other ships. And unfortunately, during one of these sailings in October of 1942, the Queen Mary collided with the HMS Kurosawa, and it just tore it in half. And unfortunately, many of the crew members died instantly, and others drowned or succumbed to the hypothermia in the freezing water. But the Queen Mary never stopped to rescue any of these soldiers, right? So it basically compromised thousands of soldiers on board, or it could have compromised the thousands of soldiers on board if it stopped. You got 15,000, soldiers on one ship, and you've got about 300 some odd people on the other ship. Sorry, we're letting the other 300 go. So it was estimated that I think it was 329 men died as a result of what happened when that happened in October of 1942. And so one of the things that was said to happen is that it was known after the war, and as it was sailing through, the years, and especially when it's docked in the city of Long Beach, that people who would go down into the front of the ship area, where it's gutted now, they would hear noises and they would hear things that were just frightening to them. And some of those sounds would be literally, it would be a sound of a ship crashing, metal tearing and ripping apart, people yelling and screaming, water rushing through, and just really, really loud sounds. And then suddenly, all of a sudden, they would stop. And so I think if you go back to the old show Unsolved Mysteries, they talked about this story on the ship, and it was a really well-known story as far as what happened, with the Queen Mary running into this other ship. And it's really unfortunate that so many people, died. But the crazy thing was that you would hear from people about this story, about how they would go into the ship area, and around the whole area, they would hear this happening. And I was like, okay, whatever, And I happened to be on a break that day, and I told one of my buddies, I said, let's go walk around the ship. I'm bored. Let's go in some of the areas we haven't been to. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. So we walked, through the engine room. We basically walked from the back of the ship all the way to the front of the ship. And we started in the engine room and worked our way forward into the boiler room and then into the front cargo area of the ship. And the interesting thing is that right above where we were, there's a little hole, and it's still there to this day. You can actually look down to the ship. You can't really see anything because it's a dark hole. But if you're inside, you can look up and you can see people looking down. Wow. So that day we happened to be up there, and we were looking around, and there's a lot of rust and a lot of water in the ship at the bottom. And so you have to be careful where you walk to. And we were having a good time just walking around. And I said, okay, you about ready to go? And he goes, yeah, I think I'm about ready to go. So as we start to leave, all of a sudden you hear this loud noise. And I was like, what? And it sounded like, I don't know how to describe it, but it sounded like literally like something big was going to happen. Like it was like, and I'm like, what the heck? And I look at my buddy and I'm like, what's going on? He's like, where's that noise coming from? Like, I don't know. And all of a sudden you hear what sounds to be a huge crash. And then you hear this metal ripping and tearing, and it's just this most horrific thing I've ever heard. And I was like, I was so freaked out. I literally was having to cover my ears like this because I was like, what is going on? This is crazy. I can't believe this is happening. And I literally was scared to death. And I told him, I said, we should get out of here. And as we started to walk away, and mind you, it was kind of a fast walk, all of a sudden you hear people yelling and screaming. And then you hear this rush of water. And I'm like, what the heck? And I'd heard the stories, of course, but now I'm like experiencing this, and it was the most deafening sound ever. And the crazy thing is that I looked up and I saw people looking down to where we were. And apparently they couldn't hear anything because they were just looking down. Wow. I was out of my wits. My friend and I, we literally ran out from where we were, and the sound kept going and going and going. And finally, when we got out of that area, it sounded like it stopped. And I'm like, what the heck? And I'm like, we should go back. And he's like, are you kidding? I don't want to go back there. He goes, what the hell was that? And I go, I have no idea what that was, but that's what we've heard. We've heard about this. And he's like, dude, that couldn't have been, the Queen Mary crashing into the other ship. And I'm like, it sounded like it. It sounded like people yelling, screaming, drowning. And it wasn't, and by the way, it wasn't women or children's voices. It was men's voices,
Man.
screaming, yelling. And some of it was very, you couldn't hear exactly what they were screaming, yelling. It was almost kind of like that kind of disembodied voice, but like just freaky. And I was like, we got to go back. And he's like, I am not going. I'm like, we're going back. We got to. I mean, come on. How do those people up there? I looked. They're looking down to see what's in the ship. And
Right.
did they hear it? I mean, so we walked back to the front of the area. Nothing was happening. And I told him, I said, that was the weirdest experience. I've never, ever heard anything like that in my life. And he's like,
Holy cow.
are you going to go report this? Because, the thing was, go report it to security. I'm like,
Right.
yeah, because they had a log for all these things. So we need to go report it. So we went and reported it. It's just crazy because when you hear about these things and you experience it, and it makes you go, where is that? Where is that coming from? I mean, did I just enter another dimension? Is this Twilight Zone? What's going on? I'm like scared beyond belief. And every time these things would happen, the funny thing was I would go, okay, I don't think I want to go that part of the ship anymore. I don't want to go visit on my own or go sightseeing. And then a few weeks later, you'd be like, I'm kind of bored. I'm gonna go sightseeing again. And you kind of just go, okay, well, that's a fluke. That's not going to happen again, and you never knew if something was going to happen again. Wow. That was the only time it ever happened to me. But the crazy thing is that the story, you're a tour guide, the history, what's happening. And then for you to actually experience it, you're just like, okay, what happened? I don't know. But, I don't know if I want to go visit for a while. Okay, that's good. But it was one of the freakiest things that ever happened to me on the ship, because it happened to me and another friend, and I didn't know what was happening or how to explain it. So for me, I think it was just one of those things where it's like, okay, I can't explain it, but other people have encountered it, not just me. So it must have happened, because then you start second guessing your thought. Okay. And then I'm like, hey, you remember what happened last week or 2 weeks ago? I'd ask my buddy. He's like, how do you forget something like that? That's just weird. But it is. And to think that it's so sad to hear, the story of what happened and how those men died. And then to have this like ghostly experience, and especially one you can't explain. And the thing was, the front of the Queen Mary was damaged. It was really, really, it basically had created a gap and opened up, and they had to fix it when, they got to port. But, you just, and you can't see any remnants of them where they patched up or anything like that from, the inside of the ship there. But it's crazy to think that something like that actually happened, and that, people died, and now, their spirits kind of like haunt the ship, and that thing in time almost like is still coming back. And I don't know of anyone else that's experienced it. I talked to other tour guides, anyone that experienced to this day. Back in the day, we had other tour guides that had similar experiences that, encountered things like that. And then of course, when I saw the Unsolved Mysteries, I'm like, yep.
That's it. That's the one.
You did. Wow.
I think the best thing about that too, Bob, is that you didn't experience that by yourself. There was, like, you had a witness, and vice versa. Yeah. So you can't like go back to your friends and say, oh, guess what happened to me, and they'd be like, yeah, right, whatever. It's like, no, there's proof. You had someone with you there,
right? Exactly.
Experience that with. Wow, that's just incredible.
I'm sorry, can you guys hold on one second?
Absolutely. Welcome in, guys. If you guys are here, we haven't ignored the chat.
Thank you for being with us. We see each and every one of you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
If you guys are liking these ghost stories, you guys know the drill. Monster mash that like button for us, guys, and please share this stream if you haven't done so already. We appreciate it. BerryPlace28, if you have not subscribed to him, please subscribe to him. If we can share BerryPlace's link, we would greatly appreciate it, guys. Who's here? We got Christina Holmes in the
Danny
house.
Santos, Zombembies. Hello, Winks.
Slim Devon's Adventures.
Pirate Girl.
Winks Wild Ride. What's going on, friends? Miss Garcia. How is everyone doing?
thank you guys, everybody, for being here. We've had a strong group here tonight. I think we saw some names we're not as familiar with that are new here tonight. Thank you for joining us and following your friend Barry Place over here to hear his stories. Hey, Holly.
Hey, Holly. Donnieland.
Hey, Donnieland.
Welcome in.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up with everything and the chat on this one, so forgive our silence. We're trying not to be busy with the chat and not paying attention to our guests tonight. So, but again, thank you to our mods for dropping all the appropriate links and welcoming people in. We appreciate you.
Joanna the Jedi, welcome in.
Did we lose him?
He's probably putting little ones to bed.
He might be putting a little one to bed. But yeah, pretty cool. Stories that you've kind of heard about the Queen Mary and then are getting a little confirmation on from somebody that's in the know about these things. And then his ability to tie that in with history and just being so well spoken, Bob. We appreciate this. This is really neat.
You're welcome. My apologies. I needed to step away for just a second.
No
you
problem.
are fine, my friend. We are enjoying these stories so much, Bob. Like, we don't want you to stop.
Well, I've got basically one more personal encounter, and then I've got another encounter that we're going to talk about that I personally have not encountered, but want to tell you a little bit more about it. So the last story that I have, and this is going to sound kind of weird, but so the tour guides aboard the Queen Mary always love to roam the ship, as I was talking about. And a lot of us always had a lot of ghost stories. Well, the one thing that people saw a lot of or heard a lot about was the ship's, well, it was actually an engine room employee. And it was named John Petter. And he was 18 years old. And unfortunately, I believe it was July 10th of 1966, they were doing basically they had watertight doors throughout the ship because obviously if the ship crashed and they need to cut the water off from getting to other parts of the ship, they would close those watertight doors. Well, they were doing a like emergency procedure run, and they were just going through the procedure of what do we do in case everything closes. Well, unfortunately, while they were going through this emergency procedure, John was going through the door and he tripped, fell, and the door crushed him and cut him in half. And basically, he died instantly, obviously. Now, a lot of people say it was door 13, but it really wasn't door 13. They call it door 13 right now, but it was actually a different door. But because of this situation, they call it door 13. But the thing about John is that he's been known to be seen throughout the engine room in blue coveralls. Sometimes he would talk to people and ask him where his wrench was. Sometimes they would just hear a disembodied voice in the background. Sometimes they saw like a ghostly image of him and he would disappear. So he's one of the ghosts that is pretty frequented in the Queen Mary, besides the pool area where Jackie and some of the other ghosts are for hauntings. So a lot of people like to talk about John just because he died aboard the ship. Everyone knows his story. It's unfortunate what happened, but because they also experience these things. And so it wouldn't be uncommon for me to be on a tour where we'd be talking about how the engine room worked and how they communicated with the ship's officer up in the pilot area for the ship. So we would sometimes tell the stories of John and sometimes not. But sometimes people would ask you, just kind of like that lady asked me about the lady in white, hey, who's that guy in the blue coveralls over there? And you're like, excuse me? Wow. There's no one over there. It's John. They're like, what do you mean it's John? And then you have to tell the story. But the thing is that there were times where I was on the ship where we'd be walking around. And again, sometimes I was on tour, sometimes I wasn't. And you would hear a whisper in your ear and you're like, the heck was that? Or you feel a cold chill and then you'd hear something drop or move or something like that, and you're like, okay, and you look over and there's nothing in that area. But there was always something that was happening. It was a very active area for the ghosts, or at least for John Petter. And so people, really liked asking about him because, he was the one that most people saw. And so one time, don't ask me why, and don't ask me why I agreed to this, but the tour guide said, you know what, we should stay after him. Maybe we should like do our own little like ghost hunt. And we were like, okay, that sounds like fun. And then someone said, you know what, even better, let's get a Ouija board out. And let's see if we can do something to, conjure up his spirit. And I was like, and of course, all of us were like, all right, whatever. Now I know a little bit more about Ouija boards. I don't think that was a good idea. But anyhow, we ordered some Domino pizzas, and there must have been about, I think it was about 10 of us that stayed after work that night. And after the Queen Mary closed, we, ate some pizza, went down there, took the Ouija board, went down to the engine room, and proceeded to, try to conjure up, John's spirit so we could, see him or talk to him. So we had been down there for probably about an hour and 50 minutes, and nothing had ever happened. And we were actually getting tired. We were like, maybe we should move to a different part of the ship, do something different, go walk around. And all of a sudden, security comes walking by, because security would walk through the ship and see what was happening, what was going on. And they see us and they see the Ouija board, and they're like, what the heck is going on here? And we're like, oh, we're just trying to conjure John Petter's ghost. And they're like, seriously? And we're like, yeah. And we're like, are we in trouble or anything like that? And he's like, so maybe you didn't conjure his ghost, but maybe you conjured something else. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he goes, right now we have a guest at the front the hotel front desk who's yelling and screaming and really upset. And we're like, why? And he goes, well, apparently he saw a ghost and he's really upset. And so we already had to dispatch, security over to him, and we checked out his room, didn't see anything, but supposedly something else just happened. And it just was on the walkie-talkie before I found you guys that they're sending security back out to him to talk to him again. And we're like, let's go. So we ran up to the hotel, and we knew obviously a lot of the people that worked there at the hotel, including the, bellman. And so one of the bellmen sees me, and he says, what are you guys doing here? Why are all you together? Aren't you guys off work now? It's late. And we're like, well, we were trying to see if we could find John Petter's ghost and spirit, but we couldn't. But we heard that someone's freaking out up here at the front desk. He goes, oh, yeah, you better go over there right now to the front desk. The guy's yelling and screaming. And we're like, what? So we leave the bellman. We go over to the front desk, or close as we can get without, looking like we're looking and going, oh, what's happening over there? And this guy literally is in his pajamas. He's yelling and screaming that he wants a different room on a different side of the ship at the different end of the ship. And he wants, to, be close to, other people. And we're like, what the heck is going on? He's really upset and freaking out. So after they finally, took him away to get a new room, and we waited for him to get everything out of his room so that he could take it to the other room, we went up to the front desk to talk to some of our friends who were working there. I'm like, what happened? Because he was freaking out. And they said, well, he was in his room, and there's spirits of Bob BerryPlace28. He actually was in his room, and he heard some noises, and he saw a ghost in the room, and he said it looked like a ship's officer. And we were like, okay. And he got freaked out. He came to the front desk, and we said, look, there's no one in your room. We'll have security go with you to your room. But we can't find anything there. Are you sure you saw what you saw? And so they said, please go back. And if there's any other problems, we'll switch you to another room. So we went back to his room. And while he was in the room, he felt like, something was there or in the room. And so he was trying to keep his eyes closed, and finally he opens his eyes, and he says he told the front desk employees that what he saw was a ghost that was basically on his back, floating through the wall into his room, where he went and basically floated above the guest. And so basically he was on his back, and he was like this, and then he's above the guest, and the guest is laying in bed, like this. All of a sudden the ghost just flips over like this and screams at him and disappears. So the guest went back up to the front desk and started yelling and screaming. And that's when we got up there, because he was yelling and screaming that he wanted a different room on a different side of the ship at the other end of the ship.
Yes.
So, but the thing is that the room that he happened to be in was known to have previously been a ship's officer's room. And what happened was, and the story goes that he snuck into another ship officer's room to steal alcohol, which he thought was gin. And when he drank it, it turned out to be shoe polish, and he died. So apparently he is the ghost of a ship's officer that died on the ship and haunts that room. And we'd always heard about his ghost stories, but never encountered it. The weird thing was that here we are trying to conjure the ghost of John Petter, and then instead we end up finding out that another guest aboard the ship who was staying in the hotel encountered the ghost of the ship's officer. So really kind of weird and spooky. And we kept
trouble.
What's that?
You stirred up all kinds of trouble.
I don't know. Let me tell you, that was the first and last time I was ever around a Ouija board.
A Ouija board,
but
absolutely.
The thing was that, wait, I've seen Wink's response. Now I get why he was yelling. I would be scared out of my...
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's crazy because, when you encounter things, you just kind of question it. And as a ship's tour guide, and because you hear the stories, you're kind of like a little unfazed, but kind of like, what happened? Mm-hmm. And when guests hear it or experience it and then report it, it's just really, really, it's kind of scary in a sense, because you're like, wow, what did they experience that he is so upset that he's yelling and screaming at the front desk that he wants a different room on a different side of the ship at a different end of the ship around people. I mean, that's I'm surprised he wanted to stay there in the first place,
I think I would have packed my bags.
Yeah. But I think it was about must have been like probably 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. So maybe he didn't, want to try to find another place to sleep. But yeah, he was really upset, and it was a crazy story, especially when you hear that the ghost had floated in on its back above the guests and then flipped over and screamed at them. That's just really freaky. So then, so the last thing to share with all of you is that you may have heard it, and you can research it. You can go onto websites and you can actually go experience this on the Queen Mary. But there's a place called room B340. So room B340 is actually three third-class rooms that were combined to make one room. So I think it was B 222, 224, and 226. They were all gutted and meshed into one to make a bigger room for the hotel when they opened up the Queen Mary Hotel in the early 70s. Well, the thing is that people have experienced, and I didn't experience this. I've been in the room, but I didn't have any experiences there. But people had talked about how they were laying in bed and bed sheets would be ripped off of them, or they would be in the room, they would hear disembodied voices, or they would hear, things like falling, or they would go to enter the room. Before they could enter the room, they would hear noises on the other side, or the door would shake violently. In fact, you could probably, I think, and you could probably search TikTok and YouTube and stuff. I'm sure you can find, there people have put some videos online about room B340. But it's kind of crazy hearing that can happen, that, people have encountered those stories. The weird thing is they had so many complaints about people staying in that room. They finally shut it down and said that that's it. There's too many paranormal experiences happening out of this room. So they closed it in the 80s, and they kept it closed for 30 years, and they finally reopened it. And when they reopened it, it was highly sought after by many paranormal, enthusiasts. And so they now let you rent that room, but it costs, I think it's around $499 a night to stay in that room and to hopefully get a paranormal experience. So you can check into the hotel, you can request that room and hopefully get it. But yeah, it's, I don't know if I'd want to check into that room, spend all that money. I mean, like, it's fun to go, paranormal, hunting, stuff like that. But at the same time, it's like, do I really want to spend that kind of money to experience that? I don't know, man.
Yikes! Yeah,
I don't think you're spending that money to go there to sleep that night.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah, you're going to be up all night trying to get your money's worth.
Exactly.
Record whatever you encounter. Yeah, have, you know, recorded experiences in them that they charge for, and it can be pricey.
Yeah, we were
The
talking about that earlier today.
doesn't sound too bad.
What's that?
Book it.
$4.99 doesn't actually sound too bad.
Yeah, that's true. But
Yeah.
you know, when you think about it, costs, you know, about what, early 700s to stay during the week at Grand Californian, and that's
Yeah.
kind of close to it. You're like, ooh, I don't know.
I
Grand
know.
California Disneyland or a haunted Queen Mary room that I may experience paranormal activity or may not. So yeah.
I mean, if
It
the
depends
Grand,
on your mood.
I would say if the Grand Californian's haunted,
I was
then
gonna say,
we'll
is
go.
the Grand Californian haunted?
I don't know about that. Holly says I'm
Probably
not
not.
scared.
Oh man.
Unless someone's playing with the Ouija board in there, then maybe it's haunted.
No.
Hopefully not.
No.
So-
Hopefully
That's a whole other show.
One of my friends is online, Dave Tulo. He says, my wife and I had a massive cologne smell one morning, like someone spilled a whole bottle right on the bed sheets, lasted about 30 seconds and completely went away. So there was also no, and I don't know if this is the one, David, but there was the lilac ghost, and there's a woman who apparently loved the smell of lilac. And so sometimes you would be in the room and the room would smell of lilacs, and you're like, what the heck is going on? So who knows? David, maybe you stayed in that room with the lilac ghosts.
He may have. Oh wow, that's
Wow.
incredible. That's incredible. Well, this is so amazing.
Scully Girl says we can all split it. Oh, sure.
Right? I don't know how many people they would let in.
Yeah,
I
no
know
kidding.
there's got to be a
It's
capacity to
probably
that
just
room.
double occupancy. Yeah.
But yeah, if we went, we probably obviously wouldn't go to sleep. It would be there to just do investigations.
Yeah.
Because we've tried. It's tricky when you go out and do ghost investigations. You almost have to go out more than just an hour because you can't.
You got to go out for a long time.
Yeah, you got to, and after hours, pretty
Mhm,
much
mhm.
when it's not as
When it's
active and it's
settled.
quiet. Yeah, that's the best time to
Mhm.
to get any type of footage or documentation of something that's out there. But
Right.
yeah, that would be incredible to stay there. But man, that guy sounds pretty creepy to me, floating in the air and screaming at you.
Yeah, that does sound freaky.
People in chat have stories as well, as you mentioned, Dave Tulo, and Mr. Memby's here says at BerryPlace28, my grandmother told us stories about how she took a world cruise. Wait, I lost it. Where did you go? The chat's moving too fast.
Oh, on the Queen Mary and Dance in the Great Ballroom back in the day.
Isn't that neat?
Wow.
That's a cool story. Yeah, there's definitely going to be some history on the Queen. She's got a lot of stories aboard. A client we had in Newport Beach, we sold a home in Newport Beach, and she has some of the teak chairs from the deck back, I don't know, from what, the late 30s, early 40s?
At least,
from the
yeah.
Queen Mary before the war period. So those are really neat. Yeah. Thank you,
Oh,
Scully.
we got a new member here.
Hey,
Thank
membership.
you.
Thank you, Scully
Thank you
Star
for
Fashions.
everyone who's joined us tonight. We appreciate all of the visitors. If you like what you see, if you're into ghost stories, we do these roughly every 2 weeks. So tune in every 2 weeks. And on other Thursdays, sometimes we get to the movie nights. It depends on our work schedule.
Yeah.
We got a little busy last week and it was hard for us to sit down and watch a movie. So we miss out one. We'll make up that one, but we're pretty consistent with the ghost story nights every other Thursdays. And we appreciate Berry coming in and sharing with us. Berry, did you have anything else to share?
No, that's it. One of these days, maybe we'll talk about other ghostly experiences we've had.
Other experiences he was kind of sharing. So we would love to have you back. You are an amazing storyteller and so appreciated. We appreciate you.
The cool thing about tonight is none of this is a coincidence. It just happens to be because we planned this for a while, haven't we, Bob?
Yes.
Queen Mary just announced that their haunt is coming back.
Dark Harbor.
Dark Harbor is coming back. So it's like, what are the odds that
they dropped that news?
They dropped that news just the other day, and here we are talking about the Queen Mary.
But yeah, Barry told us about his experiences on the Queen Mary. It's been over a month, hasn't it?
I think it has, since whatever you guys did the last ghost story, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was. I'm trying. Was it when we did the black-eyed children stories, or
Ooh, I
maybe
can't remember.
yeah, it's been a while. So yeah, with all the news dropping for the Queen Mary and halfway to Halloween, and so it all kind of ties in as we're ramping up on the season here. So, question for you, Barry: are you going to be going to Dark Harbor this year?
I want to. I didn't have a chance to go last year. Last year, the only place I really went to was Not Scary Farm. So this year, I'd like to go back to Dark Harbor as well as Halloween Horror Nights, etc. So yeah, it's on my list, but I just haven't worked anything out, obviously. But we'll see what the dates are and if I can make it. But always fun to go with friends. So if you guys want to go,
Yes.
or if we can get a group, it's always a lot of fun to go.
100%. I think a bunch of folks here too, if they might be local, it would be fun just to go even maybe on a day trip with you. And if you would be able to be our tour guide.
Yeah, we could. The only problem is without having keys to the ship, you couldn't go to some of the places. You could walk around the top and the promenade deck and all that stuff. You could go to the Grand Salon and the Queen Salon and things like that, but you wouldn't be able to go to some of those really cool spooky places without a guide. And then also it's interesting too because they do have a tour now, a ghost tour. In fact, David Tulo, who's in here, it was his birthday. We were celebrating, and then my friend Vince, who's
Happy
also
birthday,
watching.
David.
We went there and it was fun. It was neat to go on the tour. It was a couple hours long and you went like late at night. Again, nothing really happened that night, that we really experienced, but it was fun to go on. And it's always, even if it's just a quick tour, it's neat. But then of course, sometimes they build in, things to happen. So they go, like, what was that? Wow. Okay.
Oh,
It's
neat.
really just something they did. So, but
Wow.
regardless, it's a lot of fun, and I hope you guys enjoyed tonight. And thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it, and
We
hopefully we
thoroughly
can do
enjoyed
this
this.
again
I think
in
everyone
the
here
future.
did too.
Everyone had a blast in
Yeah.
here. We really did.
Danny Santos, he must have said 100 times how awesome this was and how amazing your stories were.
Oh, cool. Yeah, sorry, I wasn't reading the chat, everyone, because I was kind of storytelling. But at the same time, thank you to you guys for putting on the ghost stories, because the last time when I first saw this, I think was the last time you guys did the show, and even my daughter walked by and said, "Oh, they're talking about ghost stories. Ooh, what happened? I want to know." And so she was even interested. So I think it's always fun. People are always interested to hear about the paranormal and spirits and things like that. And so, it's neat to hear other people's stories or experiences and to experience it through them. So thank you for letting me share my stories with you.
Oh, we're grateful. We're grateful.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you again for joining us. We're going to go ahead and take the stage and close out. Any last words, Barry? Please, let's drop Barry's link.
Let's
if
drop
you
Barry's
are
link
not
in there, folks.
a subscriber to BerryPlace28, let's give him some subscriber love. He has amazing trivia nights.
Yes.
Really entertaining, a lot of fun. We enjoy those as a family. And he is an amazing park streamer. He streams Disneyland, and he also does the other local parks, Knott's Berry Farm, and you may visit others upon occasion. But as you've seen tonight, he just knows how to tell a story, and he is thoroughly entertaining. We really enjoy BerryPlace28.
Oh, thank you so much. And by the way, what was I going to say? Oh, I want to let you guys know that I think I'm streaming on Sunday, and it's Bats Day or Goth Day. So I don't know if you guys are going. Are you going?
You will be there for Bats Day.
Nice. Is it your first time going?
It is. Well, I think we've been once before, not really planned. It just kind of happened.
Yeah.
But this one, with being the 25th anniversary, we'll definitely be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always fun. So if you guys want to come check it out, LivingDeadFam and myself will be there. So have fun and enjoy the streams on Sunday.
You got it.
Thank you, Barry.
Have a good evening, and we'll see you on the Great Race tomorrow.
Yes, Great Race.
Are you going to make that? You won't be there.
Fridays are hard for me to go to Disneyland, so I won't be a part of the Great Race, unfortunately. But I hope you guys have fun and everyone else that's doing it.
Well, maybe you can help sabotage from the other side.
Help us out.
I guess I'm gonna have to order that big, huge taco for Slim Devin.
That's right. Did you hear that, Slim Devin?
I know, you're in trouble. All right. Have a good evening, and we will see you on Sunday.
See you Sunday.
We'll see you Sunday.
Good night, everyone.
Barry.
Good night,
Good
Barry.
night. All right,
Right.
guys. Thank you again for joining. So we were talking about the great race that the amazing Donnyland has put time into. Donnyland and Jens, you guys know them. If not, if someone could drop their link as well. Donnyland has put on this incredible venture for streamers at Disneyland, and that's going to be over the next 3 Fridays. We've got tomorrow night, the 10th, and the 17th, where a bunch of streamers are going to get together and see who can ride all the rides at Disneyland first.
It's over the course of what, 3 weeks?
It's over the course of 3 weeks, but it may not take 3 weeks.
Probably not.
Someone may be pretty savvy, and we've been having a lot of fun with it on the back end, and how we're going to sabotage each other, in various ways. We don't want to give away all the secrets because we want it to be fun for all of you to watch and join in on. So LDD, Living Dead Dad will be there tomorrow with Living Dead Son, and I'll be on my way to LAX to go get our daughter. She's flying in from Ohio. And hopefully we'll all be together as a family next week. We're still working out those kinks, trying to find some tickets or something for everybody. But we will also all be together as a family, for sure, all together as a family. Even some of our family that you haven't met yet and seen their faces, maybe just in the chats, on Sunday for Bats Day. So we will be dressing in our best spooky attire and melting in the sunlight, I imagine. I'll be the one out there with my spider web umbrella. You should see me out there. And we can't wait to join you. It's been almost 2 weeks since we've been in the park. Again, busy work schedule, and it happens, but we're really excited to get out there again and see you. So I'll probably see you guys at the end of the stream tomorrow. We'll be in downtown Disney hanging out, waiting for this guy and Living Dead Son to get their race to completed for the night.
That's right.
So get in the chats of everybody, and you're going to have your favorites, and you may be able to get into other. So you can also participate in this and say, oh, hey, the wait time is only 5 minutes over at this ride, when doggone well it's over an hour. So you can absolutely, Holly, you can sabotage other streamers on our behalf. And we've got to decide who we can trust on here, who's giving us good information, who is not. And again, boy, our hearts were aching to be back on here with you guys. I think it's been like 12 or 13 days since we can go live. We were counting.
That's right.
And we missed y'all. Thank you for spending this evening with us.
And we also another news, the for movie night, they just released. That's right. On YouTube, they released a lot of Hollywood classic, Universal monster movies.
Yeah, not all of them,
but some good ones.
Yeah. So Frankenstein was on there. I wanted to watch The Creature from the Black Lagoon. That was not on there. But there were a few on there. So definitely check those out. We may pick one of those for our next movie night, because we can revisit Clue at any time. We might want to take advantage of these Universal classics while they're up on there.
I think if they put them up there just to celebrate the halfway to Halloween season.
Everyone was really into halfway to Halloween this year.
Yeah.
So it was almost like a surprise holiday.
It really is, with all the Halloween stores.
It's always exciting for us, but it seemed like everyone else jumped on board this year.
Yeah.
That was cool.
It's almost as big as Christmas.
Almost as big as Christmas. For us, it's as big as Christmas.
It is big as Christmas.
Yeah.
But yeah. Hopefully you guys had a great time tonight. Don't forget, before you guys leave, to do us a huge favor. Monster mash that like button for us. And we also got a membership, right? Who was that earlier?
I think we saw a new member.
Let us know who was that earlier.
If you're new here and you enjoyed the content, go ahead and join the Living Dead family by pushing that subscribe button. And they tell us that pushing the like button helps a lot too. So we would appreciate that. And if you are one of our subscribers and Berry Place
Scully
is
Star
new to
Fashions,
you,
that's
Scully, there she is. And if Berry Place is new to you, check out his channel and give Berry a subscribe. He really puts out amazing content, and he's just a great guy. And his family is a wonderful family. We've had the joy of seeing his wife and daughter out there with him as well. And sometimes his daughter takes over the camera and she is just a hoot. So,
and he's got great swag.
And he has got, oh my gosh,
the best swag. The Berry swag. It's the best.
He has the best swag. We have won some things on his channel. He does amazing giveaways, and his stickers are the king of all stickers.
Yes.
And
but you got to go on his trivia night to win his swag.
Mm-hmm. And any other giveaways that he may do. So go get yourself some Berry Place swag. We love his stickers. They're quality. They're beautiful. We have his magnets on our fridge,
yep.
and we're excited to share. So definitely. Yeah, she got it. Holly got some recently too. Definitely. It's pretty, isn't it? I know. Winks, I think Winks did a good subscription number tonight. Was it 900? Congratulations to Winks Wild Ride. If you guys aren't following Winks Wild Ride, we love the Winks family. Everybody on here, Donnie Land. We love everybody on here. So yeah, the Berry Place swag is top tier for sure. I think we could ramble on all night, but we will be getting our kids to bed as well. Again, good night to you all. Berry Place, thank you again. A million thank yous. And we'll see you tomorrow night.
All right, guys. We will see you all tomorrow night. And have a good night, folks. We love you guys. Thank you for being here. You guys are also part of the Living Dead family. So have a good night. See you tomorrow. And like I always say, we will see you all a little later. Good night, guys.
Good night.